My name is Laura Bennett. I am 34 years old. I have been divorced for 2 years, and I want to tell you about the night my marriage ended before it had fully begun. Not with a fight, not with a betrayal discovered over months, not with the slow erosion that takes most marriages apart. It ended on our wedding night, at midnight, when I walked down a hallway in a hotel suite, toward a sound I should not have been hearing, and opened a door I cannot unopen. I want to tell you this whole story, not just the door, the whole story, because the door only means what it means if you understand what was behind me when I walked toward it. What I had believed, what I had given, what I had missed, for 2 years, because I was in love in the specific, consuming way that makes you a poor observer of the things you most need to see. This is a story about love and about the things love makes invisible. It is also a story about what you find when the invisibility ends. And it is, I hope, a story about what comes after, because there is always an after, even when the door has been opened and cannot be closed, and the after is what this was really about. Welcome to Cold Drama Stories. Stay with me. I met Daniel Hargrove at a work conference in Nashville. I was 29. He was 32. He was tall, in the specific way that makes a room feel different when someone walks into it, and he had a laugh that arrived without warning and left the space warmer than it had been before it came. We talked for 4 hours at a conference dinner where we were supposed to be networking. We were networking, technically. We were in the same industry, adjacent companies, a professional overlap that would later become logistically complicated, and that we navigated, we thought, gracefully. We talked about work for the first hour, and about everything else for the other 3. He was smart in the way I find most attractive, which is not the showy kind, but the kind that reveals itself sideways, in the questions he asked, rather than the statements he made. He asked good questions. I should have paid more attention to the questions he didn't ask. We dated for 2 years before the engagement. They were, in my experience of them, good years. Not perfect. No years are perfect, and I do not trust the people who describe their relationship years as perfect, because perfection is a retroactive gloss applied to the past by people who need their love story to be a certain shape. We had disagreements. We had the ordinary friction of 2 people with established lives trying to merge those lives without losing themselves in the merger. We worked through the friction, or I believed we worked through it, which I now understand is not necessarily the same thing. He was attentive. He remembered things, the coffee order, the anniversary of my mother's death, the name of the colleague who had caused me trouble 3 years before we met. He remembered the way people remember when they are genuinely interested, not when they are performing interest. I believed in the genuineness. I had no reason not to. His mother's name is Sandra Hargrove. I want to introduce her here, at this point in the story, because this is where she actually belongs. Not at the door. Here. In the 2 years before the wedding, when she was present in our relationship in ways that I catalogued and contextualized and explained to myself and never once looked at directly. Sandra is 58 years old. She is a small woman with precise features and the specific energy of someone who is always slightly ahead of every situation, who has assessed the room before you have finished looking around it. She is charming in the way that certain women are charming, completely, effortlessly, with the particular skill of someone who has been deploying charm for decades and has it down to an art form. She loved her son with a completeness that I found, in the early months, touching. The phone calls, the visits, the way she spoke about him with a pride that had not dulled with his adulthood, which is a thing you see in some mothers, and that reads, when you are in love with their son, as a testament to his worth. It reads differently in retrospect. She was warm to me, consistently, specifically warm, in ways that felt genuine, and that I now understand were genuine in a certain sense. She was not performing warmth to manipulate me. She was warm because she had made a decision that I was suitable and that my presence in Daniel's life was something she could accommodate, and that accommodation was, for Sandra, expressed through warmth. The first thing that made me uncomfortable happened 6 months into Daniel and my relationship. She called him while we were at dinner. This is not unusual. Parents call. What was unusual was that he excused himself from the table and did not come back for 20 minutes, and when he came back, the quality of his attention had changed. He was present in the body, but not in the way he had been before the call. Somewhere else, slightly. It happened 2 more times in the following month, and I mentioned it, gently, the way you mention things when you are 6 months in and still calibrating what is yours to say. He said, "She depends on me a lot, since my dad left." His father had left when Daniel was 15. This was a thing I knew, and that I had held with the appropriate care of someone who understands that a parent's departure reshapes a child in ways that last. I understood the dependency. I adjusted my understanding of the dinners and the calls to include this context. I smoothed it over. I smoothed over many things in 2 years. The way Sandra's eyes followed Daniel in a room, not with a mother's ordinary tracking, but with a quality I cannot fully describe, except to say it was too much. The way she occasionally touched his face when they were saying goodbye, a gesture that lasted slightly longer than such gestures last between mothers and adult sons. The way she referred to me, always, as Daniel's friend in the early months and then, after the engagement, as Daniel's girl, never by my name in the possessive, always in relation to him, as if my existence was primarily meaningful in what it meant for him. I smoothed all of it over. I was in love. Love is an excellent smoothing agent. The engagement happened on a Tuesday in April, at the restaurant where we had had our first proper date, over the pasta I had ordered the first time, because the waiter had recommended it, and that Daniel had remembered, which is why we were back there, which is the kind of thing I mean when I say he asked good questions and remembered things. He proposed with the ring his grandmother had left him, which was a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, old and specific, and exactly the kind of ring I would have chosen if I had been asked. I said yes, before he had finished asking. He put the ring on my finger, and he looked at me with what I believe was love, the real kind, and I believe it because I have thought about it enough times to be sure. The love was real. What was also real was something I did not know yet. The wedding was in September. 200 guests, a venue outside the city, the specific logistical achievement of an event that requires 12 months of planning and that produces, in the day itself, a concentrated reality that is almost too much to fully experience while it is happening. Sandra was involved in the planning. Involved is the word I use because it is accurate, and because it is also the minimum accurate word. She was involved in the way of a woman who has opinions about everything and considers those opinions worth expressing, and who was, ultimately, the mother of the groom, and therefore had standing that I chose not to contest, because contesting it felt like a battle I did not need to start. She had opinions about the venue, which we used. She had opinions about the catering, which we partially used. She had opinions about the ceremony, which were offered generously and accepted selectively. She had opinions about where she would sit in relation to Daniel at the reception dinner, which produced the only genuine conflict of the planning period, in which she expressed a preference for a seat beside him rather than across from him, and I explained, as gently as I could manage, that I would be sitting beside him because I was marrying him, and Sandra had said, of course, with the warmth that accommodated everything, while conceding nothing. The day itself was beautiful. I mean that without irony. The weather cooperated. The venue was exactly as we had imagined it. Daniel stood at the end of the aisle, in a suit he had chosen himself, which was navy, and he looked at me the way you hope to be looked at, on the day you make a permanent promise to someone, and I cried, which I had not planned to do, and which surprised me more than anyone. We danced, we laughed, we received the specific, concentrated love of 200 people who had come to witness something they believed in. My sister gave a toast, that made the room cry and laugh simultaneously. Daniel's best man gave a toast that was funny in the way of someone who knows someone well enough to find the exact right material. Sandra gave a toast. Her toast was about Daniel. Not about Daniel and me, about Daniel. His childhood, his kindness, his character, the man she had raised him to be. I was mentioned twice, briefly, as the woman Daniel had chosen, which was accurate and also not quite the frame I would have chosen for a wedding toast to the couple from one of the parents. I noticed it. I told myself it was Sandra being Sandra, that she was a woman of a particular generation and a particular orientation toward her son, and that the toast was not a statement of intent. It was just a toast. I smoothed it over. We went to the hotel, the suite Sandra had insisted on upgrading to as her gift to us, which was generous, and which I had accepted because it was generous. It was a large suite, sitting room, bedroom, and an adjoining room that had been designated for Sandra because she was staying the night before traveling home the following morning, a logistical arrangement I had nodded at because one night seemed manageable. We changed out of our wedding clothes. We sat in the sitting room of the suite, and Daniel poured 2 glasses of champagne from the bottle that had been chilled in our room, and we sat together on the couch, in the way of 2 people who have just survived something large and are breathing on the other side of it. He put his arm around me. I leaned against him. He said, "I'm tired." I said, "Me too." He said, "I'm really tired, Laura." I looked at him. He was tired in a way that seemed beyond the ordinary tiredness of a long day, a kind of exhaustion that was located somewhere deeper than the body. I thought it was the emotion of the day. Weddings are emotionally expensive, the concentrated love of 200 people and the weight of a permanent promise, and the specific exhaustion of being the subject of everyone's attention for 8 hours. I said, "Let's sleep then." He said, "Okay." We went to bed. He kissed me once, and then he turned, and within minutes his breathing changed to the rhythm of sleep. I lay in the dark beside my husband of 8 hours, and I looked at the ceiling, and I felt something I could not name. Not disappointment exactly, or not only disappointment, something older, something that had been waiting underneath the planning and the celebration to be felt, a question that had not been asked and had not gone away simply because no one had asked it. I told myself it was the tiredness, that we had both given everything to the day and had nothing left for the night, and that this was the ordinary reality of weddings that no one talks about because the expectation is so loudly different. I told myself we would sleep, and in the morning, everything would be what it was supposed to be. I lay there for 2 hours. At midnight, I heard it. A sound from the room beyond the sitting room, the adjoining room, Sandra's room. I want to describe what I heard as accurately as I can, because accuracy matters here, and because I have replayed it enough times to be sure of what I heard. It was not one sound. It was a conversation, low, intimate, the specific register of 2 people speaking to each other, in the dark, in the way people speak when they believe no one can hear. And underneath the conversation, something else. A sound I will not describe in detail because this is not that kind of story, and because the detail is not the point. The point is what the sound communicated. Something was happening in that room. I got up. I put on my robe. I crossed the sitting room. I stood at the door of the adjoining room. I opened the door. I am going to tell you what I saw, and I am going to tell it plainly, because plainly is the only way to tell it. Daniel was not in the bed beside me. He was in that room, with his mother. I want to be precise about what I mean, because precision here is everything. What I walked into was not something I can easily categorize for you. It was not what the most obvious interpretation of the setup might suggest. I want to be absolutely clear about that. What I saw was something that occupied a space I did not have a name for. Something that existed in the territory between intimacy and its ordinary forms, that was not a physical act in the explicit sense, and was also not the ordinary comfort of a mother and adult son. It was wrong. In the way that certain things are wrong before you can explain why they are wrong. In the body, before the language arrives. Something that should not have been happening between two people in those configurations, that crossed lines I had not previously known, needed to be named because I had not previously imagined they needed to be drawn. Daniel saw me. He did not speak immediately. He stood up, and he looked at me with an expression I had not seen from him before, which was not guilt exactly. It was the expression of someone who has been carrying a thing for a long time, and has been found with it, and is in the process of deciding whether to explain it or deny it. He chose neither. He said, "Laura." I said, "I'm going to get dressed, and then I'm going to leave, and in the morning we are going to talk." My voice was very steady. I note this not to credit myself with something admirable, but because the steadiness surprised me, and I want to be accurate. I was not calm. I was in a state beyond the kind of feeling that produces shaking, the specific state of someone who has received information that is too large to process immediately, and whose body has therefore shifted into a mode of pure functional operation until the processing can happen. I went back into the bedroom. I got dressed. I took my bag. I left the suite. I sat in my car in the hotel parking lot for a very long time. I want to tell you what the following days and weeks looked like, because they are the part of the story that most people skip to the end of, wanting to know what happened, and I think the middle matters as much as anything. Daniel called me the next morning. I answered. He said, "I need to explain." I said, "Yes, you do." What came out over the following week, in pieces, through conversations I will not fully detail, because some of them belong to Daniel and to a therapist he has since been seeing, and not to this story, was this. The relationship between Daniel and his mother had been, for most of his adult life, structured in a way that had no healthy name. Not in the explicit way, I want to be clear again, because precision matters, but in the way of an enmeshment so complete, so long-standing, so normalized within their specific reality, that Daniel had genuinely not known it was wrong. He had grown up inside it. It was the water he swam in. It had been the water since his father left when he was 15, and Sandra had turned to her son in a way that a mother should not turn to a son, filling a role that was not his to fill, with a need that was not his to meet. He had spent his adult life managing it, the calls at dinner, the visits, the way she held his face when they said goodbye, the look in her eyes in rooms. He had managed it by keeping it invisible, not to deceive me, because it was invisible to him too. Because the things that are most deeply normalized are the hardest to see, and Daniel had grown up inside a thing he had never been outside of, long enough to look back at it from a distance. The night before the wedding, Sandra had been distressed. The word he used was distressed, which I am using without further analysis, because that analysis is not mine to do. She had needed him. He had gone to her. He had stayed. And on our wedding night, when he said he was tired, he was. He had given what he had to someone who should never have required it of him. And there was nothing left. I do not tell you this to excuse him. I tell you this because the truth is more complicated than a simple villain and a simple victim, and I have learned, in the 2 years since, that the complicated truth is the only one that helps you actually heal. The simple version is satisfying in the short term. The complicated version is what you need to build something real on. He needed help I was not equipped to give. Sandra had done something to her son that left him unable to give me a marriage. She had not done it maliciously, which is the part I have had the most trouble making peace with, because malice is easier to be angry at than damage. She had done it from her own damage, her own need, her own history of being left, by her husband, by her parents, by a childhood I do not know the full details of. She had turned to her son because he was there, and she was in pain, and pain does not always know the difference between what is appropriate and what is available. None of that makes it right. All of it makes it comprehensible. Both things are true, and I hold both. The divorce was not dramatic. I want to tell you that. because I think dramatic divorces are the ones that get told most often, and the absence of drama in mine does not mean the absence of pain. It means we were two people who had both, in different ways and for different reasons, run out of the energy required for battle. Daniel agreed to everything. Not from guilt, or not only from guilt, because he was beginning, in those weeks, to understand what he had been carrying, and what carrying it had cost both of us, and the clarity of that understanding produced in him a specific, exhausted grief that I recognized as genuine. He went to therapy. This was his decision, and I had nothing to do with it, and I mention it only because I think it matters, because people are capable of beginning to understand things that have been invisible to them, and because the beginning of understanding is itself a form of dignity that I want to acknowledge. Sandra and I did not speak after that night. There is nothing I want to say to her, and nothing I believe she is capable of hearing from me, and that is not anger but clarity, which is different, which is colder and cleaner and more sustainable than anger. I moved back to my apartment. I went to therapy myself, not because I was broken, but because I had just had my entire understanding of my marriage and my 2 years disassembled, and disassembled things need someone who knows how to look at the pieces and help you understand what you are actually looking at. My therapist is a woman named Dr. Patricia Walsh, who has the specific, unhurried patience of someone who has sat across from many different versions of human wreckage and has never once been surprised into judging any of it. She asked good questions, better than Daniel's, which I told her once, and which made her smile. She helped me understand something that I want to give to you, because it is the most useful thing I learned in the year after the door. She said, "The things that hurt us most are almost never the things we didn't know. They are the things we knew and translated. We knew something was happening, and we gave it a different name because the real name was too large. You knew, Laura. You knew in the hallway at dinner. You knew in the toasts. You knew in the goodbyes. You gave it other names because you needed to." She said, "The work is not to stop knowing things. It is to get better at not translating them." I have spent 2 years working on not translating. Here is what my life looks like now. I want to tell you this not as a triumphant ending. It is not a triumphant ending. Or not only that, but because the story deserves to have a now, and the now deserves to be seen. I am 34. I live in an apartment that is mine, the first home I have chosen and furnished and organized entirely according to my own preferences, without negotiation or accommodation. It is smaller than the apartment Daniel and I had shared, and it is also more fully itself, more fully mine, which is a trade I have made without regret. I have friends I did not know I was neglecting during the years of smoothing things over, because smoothing requires energy, and energy spent smoothing is energy not spent on other things, including the ordinary maintenance of friendships that are not urgent enough to demand attention. I have reclaimed those friendships. They are better than they were, which is what happens to things you let breathe after a long time without air. I have not dated, not because I have decided not to, but because the timing has not felt right, and I have learned, in 2 years of therapy and self-examination, to trust my sense of timing rather than override it. When it feels right, I will. I am in no hurry. I have discovered that I am sufficient company for myself, which is not a small discovery. I have a habit now. Every morning I sit at my kitchen table for 30 minutes before I do anything else. I drink my coffee, and I look out the window, and I practice what Dr. Walsh calls active noticing, paying attention to what is actually in front of me, rather than the story I have been told about it, or the story I am telling myself about it. What is this, actually? What is the real name of this thing? It sounds simple. It is not simple. It is the most demanding practice I have ever committed to, and also the most valuable. My mother called last week to ask how I was doing. I told her honestly, which is something I have not always done with my mother, and which she receives now with the specific, careful attention of a woman who knows her daughter is offering her, something she used to withhold. She said, "Are you happy?" I thought about it honestly. I said I am better than I have ever been at knowing what I actually feel. I said I am working on whether better at knowing is the same as happy. She laughed. She said, "That sounds like something your grandmother would say." I said, "Maybe." I think she was smarter than I gave her credit for. My mother said, "She always said you were." Here is what I want to give you, every piece of it. The first piece. Love does not make you blind. It makes you a generous translator. You see what is in front of you. You translate it into something that fits the love you want to believe in. The work is not to stop loving generously. It is to notice when you are translating, and to ask, before you complete the translation, what the original word actually was. The second piece. Some damage is not chosen. Sandra did to her son what had been done to her, not from malice, but from the overflow of an unexamined wound. This does not excuse it. It explains it. The difference between excuse and explanation is important. An excuse removes responsibility. An explanation preserves it while adding context. Daniel was responsible. Sandra was responsible. They were also both people shaped by forces that preceded them, carrying things they had never been helped to put down. That is not a reason to stay in something that is destroying you. It is a reason to leave without requiring them to be monsters first. The third piece. Your body knows before your brain does. The discomfort in the hallway at dinner, the thing in Sandra's eyes in rooms, the quality of Daniel's exhaustion on the night that should have been different. My body registered all of it. My brain translated it into acceptable things. Pay attention to the body. The body is not wrong. It is just faster than the story. The fourth piece. The door you open cannot be unopen. I have spent 2 years making peace with this. I cannot unknow what I saw. I cannot unopen the night, or return to the version of my marriage that existed before midnight on the first day of it. The unknowing is not available. What is available is the understanding of what I saw and what it meant, and what I am going to do with that understanding for the rest of my life. That is what is available, and it is enough. It is more than enough, because it is real. And the fifth piece. There is always an after. This is the thing I most want you to hear if you are sitting somewhere tonight with a door that has been opened, with a thing you have seen that you cannot unsee, with a marriage or a relationship or a family that has just revealed itself to be something other than what you believed. There is always an after. The after is not the life you planned. It is not the life you were promised. It is not the life visible from where you are standing right now, which is still too close to the door to see past it. But it is real, and it is yours, and it is being built in the days and weeks and months after the door, in the therapy sessions, and the coffee by the window, and the friendships reclaimed, and the active noticing of what is actually in front of you, rather than what you were told it was. The after is where I live now. It is imperfect and mine, and I would not trade it. Not for the sweet, not for the sapphire ring, not for the version of the life that was built on the translation of things I knew and chose not to name. I would not trade it. I'm Laura. Dr. Walsh asks good questions. My coffee is better than it ever was. Subscribe, leave a comment, tell me about the thing you finally stopped translating. I'll see you next time. I want to go back to something before I let you go, because I have been sitting with it since I started telling this story, and I think it belongs in the telling. There is a question I have been asked, sometimes by friends, once by my mother, and once by myself at 3 a.m, when the ceiling was the only thing available to look at. Did I miss the signs? The honest answer is yes and no, and both parts matter. Yes, I missed them, in the sense that I did not act on them. I did not pause at the dinner where he was gone for 20 minutes and say, "What is actually happening here?" I did not look directly at the quality of Sandra's attention in rooms and call it what it was. I did not ask the question that the discomfort was pointing me toward, because asking the question would have required me to be willing to hear the answer, and I was not willing to hear the answer because I was building something I wanted to be real. This is not stupidity. I want to be clear about that, because women who miss signs are often accused of stupidity, and the accusation is not only wrong but harmful, because it locates the failure in the person who was deceived rather than the person who deceived. I am not stupid. I am someone who was in love and who did what people in love do, which is to make the evidence fit the story they are already telling. No, I did not miss them in the sense that I saw all of them. Every one. Every dinner, every toast, every goodbye that lasted too long, every phone call that pulled him away in the middle of a moment. I saw them. I named them something else. I called them quirks and habits, and the understandable dependency of a man whose father had left and whose mother was alone. The seeing was there. The naming was wrong. And this is where the real education lives, the education I am still in the middle of, and that I do not expect to finish. The question is not whether you see, the question is whether you trust what you see enough to name it accurately before it names itself for you. I did not trust myself enough, not because I was weak, because I had been taught, in the long, slow accumulation of being a woman in the world, that my interpretations of things were uncertain, that my discomfort was probably wrong, that the generous translation was the correct one, that the less alarming name was the more mature one. I had been taught that seeing something disturbing and saying it out loud was the problem, that the woman who speaks the uncomfortable observation is the one who is difficult, dramatic, reading too much into things. So I did not speak it. I translated it into something that fit the life I was building. I am done with that. Not just in the context of this story. In all the contexts. The coffee at the window is, among other things, a daily practice of speaking the true name of what I see before the translation can start. What is this, actually? What is the real word for what I am observing? I am not perfect at it. I am better at it than I was. I am going to keep getting better. That is the after. Not triumph. Not the clean ending. The daily practice of being more honest with myself than I was before the door, so that the next time there is something in a room that needs its real name, I give it the real name before midnight. That is what I want for you too. Whatever your door is, whatever you are sitting with that has a real name, you have been giving a different one. I want you to have the vocabulary. I want you to trust the observation. I want you to say it out loud, first to yourself, and then to whoever needs to hear it, before it says itself for you at midnight in a hotel suite on your wedding night. Say the real name. You know what it is. You have always known. I'm Laura. The coffee is on. The window is clear. My name for things is getting more accurate every day. I'll see you next time. I want to talk about the ring. The sapphire, surrounded by small diamonds. His grandmother's ring. Old and specific, and exactly the kind of ring I would have chosen if I had been asked. I gave it back. The morning after the door, before I left the hotel, I left it on the nightstand in the bedroom of the suite. I did not throw it. I did not make a dramatic gesture of it. I simply took it off and set it down and left. I have been asked whether I regret giving it back, whether I should have kept it, legally, as property. I have been asked this by people who frame the question in terms of what I was owed, which is a framing I understand, and that I am going to tell you why I rejected. I did not want the ring, not because I was being selfless, or because I was trying to take some kind of moral high ground. I did not want it, because wearing it would have required me to carry the weight of what it had meant, and I was already carrying enough. The ring belonged to a story that was over. I do not carry finished stories on my finger. What I do carry, which I want to tell you about, is the wedding dress. I have not gotten rid of it. It is in the back of my closet in a garment bag, and this is the thing that surprises people most when I tell them about it. Because the conventional wisdom is that you burn the dress, or donate the dress, or stuff it in a box, and never look at it again. I have done none of those things. I keep it because I wore it. Because I walked down an aisle in it, and I meant every word I said in it, and the meaning was real, even if what I was walking toward was not what I understood it to be. The dress is evidence of my sincerity, and I am not going to destroy the evidence of my own sincerity, because the object it was worn for turned out to be built on something broken. I am sincere. I was sincere on that day. That does not go away because the day went wrong. Someday I may get rid of it, when I am ready. When the garment bag in the back of the closet stops being a thing I am in a conversation with and becomes simply a bag of fabric that no longer requires my attention, I will know when that day is. I have learned to trust my sense of timing. Until then, it stays. Because I was there, and I meant it, and those two things are true regardless of what happened at midnight. My best friend's name is Rachel. She has been my best friend since college, and she is the person I called from the hotel parking lot at 1 a.m. on the night of my wedding, sitting in my car, in the parking structure, with my wedding dress on and my phone in my hand. She answered on the first ring. She said, "Laura." I said, "Something happened." She said, "Where are you?" I said, "The hotel parking lot. I'm in my car." She said, "Don't move." She drove 40 minutes in the middle of the night in her pajamas, and she sat in the passenger seat of my car. And I told her everything, and she did not say anything for a long time after I finished. She just sat there, present. Entirely present in the specific way of a person who understands that some moments do not need words, and that the most useful thing available is to not leave. She did not leave. She sat with me until almost 4 a.m. When I was ready to drive, she followed me home. She slept on my couch. In the morning, she made coffee and she said, "We are going to figure this out. Not, I will fix it. Not, here is what you should do. We are going to figure this out." I want to tell you about Rachel, because I think the Rachels of the world deserve to be acknowledged. The people who pick up on the first ring and drive 40 minutes in pajamas, and do not leave, and do not fill the silence with the wrong words. The people who say "we" when the situation is yours, and theirs is just to show up. I have tried, in the 2 years since, to be someone's Rachel. To pick up on the first ring, to show up in my pajamas, to know the difference between the moment that needs words and the moment that only needs staying. This is, I think, what survival teaches you when you have people like Rachel in it. Not only how to survive, how to be the person someone else survives with. That is the after, too. The after is not only therapy and coffee and active noticing, it is also being Rachel for someone else. It is showing up. It is the first ring. It is the 40 minutes in the middle of the night. It is staying. Stay for each other. That is the lesson underneath all the other lessons. The names you give to things matter, and the trust you extend yourself matters, and the active noticing matters. All of it matters, and underneath all of it is this. Stay for each other. The rest will figure itself out. I'm Laura. Rachel still has her pajamas. The dress is still in the closet. The after is still happening. See you next time.